Okay, so you want to own a restaurant. You've got the recipe your family's been making for 20 years. You've eaten out enough times to know exactly what you do differently. You watch the dining room fill up on a Friday night, every table taken, servers moving fast, the kitchen slamming out plate after plate, and you think, this place must be making a fortune tonight. Here's the problem. That packed Friday night you're staring at might be the restaurant's best chance all week of breaking even. Not making money, breaking even. And the gap between those two ideas is where almost every new restaurant owner gets destroyed. Before we go further, we need to agree that restaurant isn't one business. It's at least four. The first is quick service, the counter order, no table service model. Think fast casual. Lower labor costs, lower average ticket, survives on volume. The second is full service casual dining, servers, table turns, a real kitchen line, moderate check averages. The third is fine dining, high ticket prices, extremely high labor and ingredient cost per plate, and razor-thin volume tolerance. The fourth is the ghost kitchen. No dining room at all, just a kitchen built purely for delivery apps. Each of these has a completely different cost structure and a completely different way of dying. Most people picturing owning a restaurant are picturing casual dining. So that's where we start. Here's what it actually costs to open the doors. Leasehold improvements, kitchen equipment, hoods, walk-in coolers, dining room build-out. Typically run $250,000 to $500,000 for a modest casual concept, more in a major city. Commercial kitchen equipment alone, ranges, fryers, refrigeration, ventilation systems, can run $100,000 to $300,000. Liquor licensing, where applicable, can cost anywhere from a few $1,000s in some states to over $300,000 in others, where licenses are capped and traded like real estate. Then there's the security deposit, typically 3 to 6 months of rent, paid before a single burner is lit. Add initial inventory, point of sale systems, staff hiring and training, marketing for opening week, and a cash reserve to survive the ramp-up period, and total startup capital for a modest casual restaurant lands between $400,000 and $850,000 before a single plate is served. Now here's the number that ends most restaurants before they ever had a real chance. The industry standard is that a restaurant should spend no more than about 28 to 32% of revenue on food cost and no more than about 30% on labor. Add those together and you're already at roughly 60% of every dollar gone before rent, utilities, insurance, or a single marketing dollar is spent. This is called prime cost, and it's the single number that determines whether a restaurant survives. Most successful restaurants keep prime cost under 60 to 65% of revenue. The ones that fail almost always let it drift past 70%, and at that point, there is mathematically no room left for profit. Let's follow a single dinner. A plate that sells for $22 might have $6 to $7 in raw ingredient cost. That looks like a healthy margin until you count everything else touching that plate. The server's wage and tip credit, the line cook's hourly rate, the dishwasher, the host, the manager on shift, all of it allocated against that one transaction. Then the rent allocation per table hour. Then utilities, the walk-in cooler, and the exhaust hoods run constantly, whether the dining room is full or empty. Then credit card processing fees, typically 2 to 3% of every transaction. Then linen service, pest control, insurance, licensing renewals, POS software fees, and eventually equipment repair when the fryer inevitably breaks on a Saturday night. By the time all of that is allocated, the actual net profit on that $22 plate is often somewhere between 50 cents and $2. The restaurant industry average net profit margin sits at just 3 to 5% of total revenue. Some efficient operators push toward 10%. Many restaurants operate at break-even or a loss for their entire first year. Here's what almost nobody accounts for going in. The sales cycle isn't the problem. The seating cycle is. A restaurant's entire revenue potential in a single night is capped by how many times it can turn each table. A casual dining restaurant might average 1.5 to 2.5 table turns per meal period. That number is not flexible. You cannot sell more dinners than you have seats and hours to serve them in, no matter how good the food is or how long the line outside gets. This is fundamentally different from a business that can simply produce more inventory to meet demand. A packed Friday night dining room at full capacity for 4 hours is the ceiling. There is no version of that night where the restaurant makes significantly more money. The physical space itself is the limit. Now let's talk about the part that quietly kills restaurants that look successful from the outside. Labor. A restaurant needs kitchen staff, front of house staff, and management covering hours. The dining room is open, and often several hours before and after for prep and close down. Labor cost doesn't scale down smoothly when a slow Tuesday brings in half the customers of a Saturday. The kitchen still needs a line cook. The dining room still needs at least one server and a host, whether 5 tables or 30 are filled. This is why slow weeknights are often where restaurants lose the most money relative to revenue. Fixed labor cost against thin revenue. Add in rising minimum wages across most U.S. states in recent years, and labor as a share of revenue has been climbing steadily, squeezing the exact margin that was already thin. Food cost volatility adds another layer most new owners underestimate. Wholesale prices for proteins, dairy, and produce swing constantly based on weather, disease outbreaks in livestock, fuel costs for transport, and global commodity markets. A restaurant that built its menu pricing around chicken at a certain wholesale price can watch that input cost jump 20 to 30% within a season, and menu prices can't be changed overnight without alienating regular customers who notice every increase. Then there's spoilage and waste, an underappreciated silent cost. Fresh ingredients have a shelf life measured in days, not months. A menu built around fresh, high-quality ingredients that doesn't accurately forecast nightly demand throws away unsold product constantly. Industry estimates suggest the average restaurant wastes 4 to 10% of the food it purchases before it's ever served. Direct cost with zero revenue attached. Here's where the psychology of the business becomes as important as the math. Restaurants survive on repeat customers, and repeat customers are extraordinarily expensive to earn and shockingly easy to lose. A single bad experience, slow service, an off night in the kitchen, a rude interaction can end a customer relationship permanently, and that customer tells other people. Meanwhile, a regular customer who visits weekly and brings friends is worth dramatically more over a year than any single transaction. But building that loyalty requires consistency on a night. The walk-in cooler dies, the newest employee is on their second shift, and the restaurant is fully booked, all happening simultaneously, which happens more often than owners expect. This is also why so many independent restaurants eventually either franchise their concept or add secondary revenue streams. Catering, private events, retail sauce or spice lines, meal kits, anything that generates revenue without depending entirely on filling a dining room seat by seat, meal period by meal period. Now let's talk about failure rates, because they're worse than most people assume. But the common statistic that 90% of restaurants fail in the first year is actually a myth. Research from Ohio State University and other hospitality studies puts first-year closure rates closer to 17%, with roughly 50 to 60% closing within 5 years. Still a brutal number, but the real story isn't sudden collapse, it's slow bleed. Restaurants rarely die in one dramatic night. They die over 18 months of a slightly bad Tuesday, a slightly high food cost month, a slightly understaffed weekend, compounding quietly until the owner runs out of the cash reserve that was supposed to cover exactly this. So where does this leave you? The restaurants that survive and eventually thrive are the ones that treat the dining room like the advertisement and the operations, like the actual business, tight control over prime cost every single week, menu engineering that pushes customers toward high-margin items, table turn optimization instead of just hoping for a full room, and eventually revenue streams that don't depend on someone walking through the front door at all. The full dining room on a Friday night was never the goal. It was the bare minimum required just to stay in the game.